ما به دنبال جنگ نیستیم.
We are not in pursuit of war with Israel. They promised us peace. But Israel has terrorized our guests in Tehran during our presidential inauguration. We want to establish peace. If you disagree, peace will not be established.
The Iranian president addressing the ongoing crisis in the Middle East as we get to 1 year after the Hamas October 7th attacks. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu and this is The Heat. On Tuesday, Iran launched nearly 200 ballistic missiles on Israel in response to the assassination of a Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah last week. Israel says it will respond to the recent attack, an escalation that could lead to a wider conflict in the region. We begin with this report from CGTN's Evangelos Ipsas in Beirut.
The Israeli Defense Forces have called for 25 more villages to evacuate in southern Lebanon as they push ahead with their ground operation. The localized and limited ground operation, as they call it, has been continuing to take place and has further escalated throughout the day. So far, what we do know is that there has been a lot of pushback by Hezbollah that has caused the life of more than 8 IDF soldiers, according to the Israeli side, while Hezbollah claims that more than 17 have been killed in clashes between the two groups. Bombardment by the Israeli tanks and the shelling from the Israeli side continues. While this ground operation is taking place, though, a number of airstrikes continue to be targeting parts of the country, but also the capital of Lebanon in Beirut. On Thursday, the early mornings of Thursday, there has been an airstrike at a medical center causing the life of 8 people and injuring 45 more. The interesting part of this airstrike, though, it is not in the Dahiya district, the stronghold of Hezbollah, but rather in the limits of the city center. It is one of the first times that the Israeli Defense Forces have been targeting places outside of the Dahiya district. But a number of other places as well have been targeted in the northern part, close to Byblos, but also in the West Bekaa Valley. Now, all these bombardments and the escalation of the conflict between the two sides have caused 1.2 million people to be displaced and to find refuge somewhere else. Thousands, hundreds of thousands had to flee southern Lebanon, while thousands also had to flee the area of Dahiya, parks, the waterfront, and a number of areas now you can see people sleeping there, and that has also have put a lot of strain to the health system of the country, as the health minister is saying that it is currently at the peak. It's saying that if this conflict does not end and there's not a ceasefire, then the government will not be able to provide the necessities to those who are actually been displaced, but also those who have been injured during this conflict. The ceasefire needs to happen, as he said, otherwise the government will not be able to provide the absolute necessities to those who are displaced. Now, the World Health Organization also mentioned that they're trying to bring into the country a plane with humanitarian aid, but it has been postponed a number of times because of concerns that they could be a target, simply because the airspace here in Lebanon has been closed and is only monitored by the Israeli Defense Forces. I'm Evangelos Ipsas reporting for CGTN, Beirut.
Okay, to discuss this and more, let's bring in our guests. Joining us from Tehran, Akbar Dareini is a researcher and writer at the Strategic Studies of Public Policy Journal in Tehran. Here in Washington, D.C., Nabeel Khoury is a former U.S. diplomat and a non-resident senior fellow at the Arab Center, Washington, D.C. From Virginia, we're joined by Michael Maloof. He is a former senior Pentagon strategic analyst. And Dan Arbell is a scholar in residence at the Center for Israeli Studies at American University. Welcome to all of you to the show. Dan, let me start with you. As I said, Iran has attacked Israel with rockets and missiles. Israel says that it stopped most of those attacks, but some did get through and reach targets at Israeli air bases as well as near the National Intelligence Headquarters. That's according to independent reports. And this, of course, follows the assassination of the Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh and the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. So the question now is, what happens next? How does Israel calibrate its response to what's going on, given that the United States has also called for some kind of measured response from the Israelis?
So yes, thank you, Anand. It's after the October 1st attack by Iran, which is the second direct attack against Israel. Israel is now considering what its options are, and it certainly vowed to avenge this attack by Iran, and it's just thinking what the right targets would be. While, as you said, the U.S. is calling for a more restrained, measured response, yet Israel wants to make it known that it can get to any target that it desires. So, there are different options here for Israel to target, whether it's military facilities, whether it's facilities with nuclear program, whether it's oil and gas infrastructure throughout Iran. It's still not clear what Israel would choose to do to make to kind of balance that what Iran has done. Clearly, Israel's attacks in Lebanon and Yemen and Syria over the last few weeks are a message to Tehran that Israel can get to any corner of the Middle East if it chooses to do so, and that Iran should try to deter Iran. And I think Israel has managed to restore some of its deterrence, but still, Iran challenged Israel on Tuesday, and I think that we are likely to see a equally tough Israeli response in return in the coming days.
Right, Ali Akbar Dareini, as Dan just told us, Israel is threatening attacks on on Iran rather, and Israel has shown that it could, as Dan pointed out, reach any corner of Iran. Now, President Biden has said that the Israelis are discussing hitting Iranian oil and gas infrastructure. Iran has also threatened to hit back and also attack any country that comes to Israel's aid. So how great is the risk that this could lead to a direct war between Iran on the one side and Israel and the United States on the other?
Everything now depends on what Israel is going to do next. Iran expects the United States to tame the Israeli government, but if Israel is going to carry out its threats, if there is any sort of attack against Iran, Iran will retaliate swiftly. If it's going to be if it manages to pass Iran's air defense systems and drops a bomb in a remote military site, Iran may react in a form probably different from a direct missile attack from its soil. But if Israel is going to attack economic installations, oil refineries, or oil platforms, then it will entirely change Iran's calculation, and Iran will hit back Israel's economic infrastructure. And if Israel is going to carry out attacks against Iranian nuclear facilities, given that Iran has spread its nuclear facilities across the vast land of Iran, and buried on the mountains, almost certainly Israel is going to fail to achieve its goals, but that will prompt Iran to retaliate stronger, and may prompt Iran to pull out of the NPT altogether. So everything depends on what Israel is going to do.
Nabeel, Khoury, what is your assessment of the situation right now between Israel and Iran? I mean, do you think that a war between the Iranians and the Israelis is now inevitable, given that the Israelis have threatened retaliation?
It's not inevitable, but it is getting more and more likely. I think this government in Israel has been itching to draw Iran into a fight, knowing full well that even though the Biden administration does not want such a fight, that they will end up backing up Israel and joining it in attacking Iran. Of course, they will call it a retaliation. More dangerous is what's happening in Beirut right now. The total destruction of Hezbollah facilities is what the Israeli government is claiming as its intention. But in the process, they are causing majority of the people who live in the south of Lebanon to leave their homes and head north. Many, if not most, of these people have nowhere to go. Also, the bombing in Beirut has expanded beyond the southern suburb. It has hit a clinical facility, a health facility outside the Dahya. It also hit media installations, which are very close to West Beirut, an area that so far has been outside of the struggle. I think this government in Israel, which everybody knows is an extreme right-wing religious government. And I've been warning interlocutors who are pro-axis of resistance in Lebanon and elsewhere in the region, who felt very confident for a while that Israel has immense capability to destroy and to destroy all over the region. And this is what this government is out to do. I think it's a pity that the world seems oblivious to how destructive they are. And sometimes people say when they listen to pronouncements from the right-wingers in the government, they say, oh, this is just crazy talk. But the crazy talk is coming about in a very, very destructive and dangerous way. I think it's up to reasonable people in Israel, the opposition, the left wing, reasonable people who are Israelis but outside of Israel, reasonable voices like Dan, whom you have on the show.
Yeah.
It's up to them to change the course of this government before it's too late, because nobody else is apparently willing or able to stop them.
Michael Maloof, as someone who's occupied very senior positions at the Pentagon as a strategic analyst, what did you make of the Iranian attack? Let me ask you that first. You know, the fact that so many missiles were able to breach Israeli defenses and get to sensitive sites like military air bases, like the headquarters of the country's spy agency. I mean, what does that tell you about Iran's military capabilities?
Well, in terms of its military capabilities, it's clear that they have that capability. It was hypersonics that were hypersonic missiles that actually hit military targets, and that was the goal. Now, there was some question whether President Pezeshkian would even launch, and it took the supreme leader ultimately to make that decision. He and Zarif, his assistant, close assistant, were in New York, and they thought they had a deal with the United States that if they reneged on retaliation of Hania last month, that there would be sanctions lifting, and that never occurred. In fact, Pezeshkian then had to go on Iranian TV and say we were lied to, but it took the supreme leader ultimately to make the decision, which means that the IRGC hardliners now are clearly back in control, even though Pezeshkian tonight has been sounding quite determined. But the question will be, will he act? He sounded tough before, but he didn't act until the supreme leader intervened. Now it's going to take, if there is a response from the Israelis, I clearly think that Iran will respond once again, probably as they threatened to do, with even greater amounts, like 10 times more, they said. Depends upon, as your other guests pointed out, that depends upon what the targets are. If it's the oil refineries, it's my thinking that ultimately there will be a very heavy response from Iran because they rely on that currency for income, and they have a very serious trading with China, so that it's going to be and also in exchange. I think it's a possibility that Iran also could blockade the Strait of Hormuz, and combined with the Houthis in Yemen could also blockade Red Sea in response. That would be very crippling to the world because it could bring on an immediate world recession, if not depression, in many cases, because of the dependency from that region of the world. So it could be very inflationary for the world. And so again, Netanyahu has made it very clear that he's going to do whatever he wants. It's notwithstanding what the United States has asked him not to do. And you can't rule out the possibility he's going to go ahead and make an attempt at the nuclear sites. That has been his ultimate goal. And he has a very narrow window now to operate. And I think anything that's going to happen is going to be very swift. I don't think he's going to wait for, he could even do a preemptive strike, and because he has this very limited period now in which to undertake his initiatives to cut off the head of the snake, as he has said, and that's Iran.
Dan Arbell, you are in close contact with people in Israel, and I'm hearing that there are two courses of action being considered right now. The one is that measured response that we talked about, a carefully calibrated response, which some people call a proportionate response. The other, and this is among military commanders in Israel as well, is to do to execute a far more forceful response, knocking out Iranian command centers, its oil installations, as well as nuclear sites. What are you hearing?
And I'm not privy to the deliberations of the defense establishment or security officials. I can really speculate here, but I want to reinforce the notion that what happened is not just an attack from Lebanon by Hezbollah that hit Israel, or from Yemen that hit Israel. These were missiles, ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, as Michael has pointed out, that were launched from Iranian soil and hit Israeli soil, entered Israeli airspace and hit Israel. So therefore, just like in April, when this happened for the first time, when Israel felt compelled to hit targets inside Iran, I believe this will be the logic behind the next action by Israel, to hit targets on Iranian soil, not just Iranian interests in the region. And therefore, all of the options that you mentioned are possibilities. But let's remember, there's no common border between Israel and Iran, and there's at least 1,500 kilometers or more than that between Israel and Iran. So it's not going to be any, these are going to be either airstrikes or missile strikes. And again, Iran is a big country, and there are 80 million Iranians, and it's very, very, it's not going to be an all-out war, I believe. I think it will be more limited, but I think that they're going to look for qualitative targets to strike rather than spread to all over the map and go crazy, so to speak. I think it will be a more measured and restrained attack rather than a all-out attack.
Ali Akbar Dareini, in a sense, has Iran fallen into a trap that was set by Israel, or Benjamin Netanyahu, to be more specific? I mean, there are analysts who've been telling us for a very long time that one of the primary goals of Benjamin Netanyahu is to draw the United States into a war against Iran. Is that what is now happening?
International relations is the scene of action and reaction. Iran's policy has been to avoid a direct confrontation with Israel. Iran's policy has been to help create a ring of fire around Israel by supporting its allies to weaken Israel steadily and gradually in a war of attrition while avoiding direct confrontation. But Netanyahu has been dreaming to drag Iran into a war, and his bigger dream has been to drag the United States into a war with Iran. And if he succeeds, that will be an October surprise, and it's very likely that Harris is going to lose the presidential elections in November. So Iran has done everything to avoid a direct confrontation with Israel. Iran postponed its retaliation for Haniyeh assassination and allowed diplomacy to work, but it didn't work. At the end of the day, the Americans reneged on their promises. They provided arms and support for Israel to continue its genocide against Gaza, and Israel repeatedly breached regulations. The Haniyeh assassination was an attack on Iran's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and killing Iranian commanders all crossed the red line. So Iran had no option but to retaliate. And if Iran had not retaliated, it would have looked weak, and it would have demoralized its supporters and its allies in the region. So Iran has been careful not to engage in a direct military confrontation, but now it depends on Israel. And finally, if there is if the Israelis are it depends on what Israel is going to do, but still we are steps away from a full-fledged confrontation.
All right, Nabeel, Khoury, Ali Akbar Dareini raises an important point there, and that the United States options are limited in a sense, aren't they? They're constrained really by domestic politics. I mean, we're just a month before the United States election. It's a crucial time for the Biden administration, and there is a feeling, as Ali Akbar Dareini pointed out, that a major war could help Trump win the presidency. So might this perhaps explain a little bit of reticence on the part of the United States on what comes next?
I mean, if so, what an insensitive attitude that, they don't want a big war because it can cause their rival Trump to win the election. Not that the humanity that's being decimated, the destruction that's occurring before their eyes, I can't believe, but obviously, I think you're right. That electoral machinations and calculations are at work here. More than that, I think this administration, and I say this with sadness because I'm a lifelong Democrat, this administration has been one of the worst administrations, especially in foreign policy, in decades. And what's happening in the Middle East right now is a colossal failure of diplomacy that Biden is personally responsible for, because he could have initiated things from day one in the White House to try to come up with different ways for conflict resolution to avoid what we're in right now. But he did not. They jumped into action when things got really bad the past year, and too late and with too little planning. They gave a few speeches and assertions, but they really, until today, do not have a decent, well-thought-out plan to resolve conflict in the Middle East. And so I think sometimes we calculate rationally and we say logically this side wouldn't do this or that, but there is no logic right now. The actors in the Middle East are acting on raw emotion. And I think I agree with the previous speaker that Iran has been restrained and has postponed a big reaction. But I think they are being drawn into it. It is a trap. Because ultimately, if Iran enters in bigger way than it has already, it will be destroyed. Israel will start it, and the US will finish it. And the military plans that have been on the table for a long time will bring Iran back to the Stone Age.
Yeah.
They're that severe, and that's what scares me and should scare everybody.
Right. Michael Maloof, for the United States, this is having consequences beyond which it has much control. I mean, if we look at the situation just today, shortly after that statement by President Biden about the likelihood of Israel hitting oil infrastructure in Iran, the oil price rose by 5%. I mean, this is something, again, that the Democrats can't afford 1 month before the election. So to what extent does that constrain the U.S.?
I think the United States is not in control of this situation. It's only been reacting the whole time. They've had no plan. You'll recall that Jake Sullivan back in March thought that everything was just so peaceful and quiet, that everything was just very, very nice, not realizing that all the things that had taken place that led up to October 7th last year culminated in this disaster. And but it had to do with everything that Netanyahu was planning, and the United States did nothing about it. And now Netanyahu has this mandate. He just brought on Gideon Sa'ar and his party, which now will give Netanyahu a majority in the Knesset, which means he can stay in office until 2026, and unless and until Biden-Harris or Trump stop him somehow, and he's going to continue on. This could go on endlessly. And even if the United States theoretically were to cut off his access to arms, Netanyahu's already made it clear that doesn't matter. He can get them from elsewhere. He's very determined to go after Iran, and I wouldn't doubt that, given his relationship, for example, with Azerbaijan, that he wouldn't use a secret base he has there to launch in and go after those nuclear sites. Number one, but number two, he has obtained now some 10,000-pound bombs, which are bunker busters, and that would be used for deep into the mountains. The other thing too, just as he demonstrated cyber warfare, I mean, he could do the same thing, and that's why the supreme leader apparently went into a bunker. Yeah.
Okay, and we're going to have to leave it there. We've run out of time, but thank you to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.